Hi everyone. I think most everybody knows me. I'm Lauren Bicker from the Department of Media and Communication, and I've been teaching an elective in the Wegmans School of Pharmacy for almost 10 years now and served on various committees, and I even did a research project on Domain 4 for my last sabbatical. So I'm pretty familiar with the pharmacy program and a lot of the people who are there, but I would like to introduce you to my colleague, Tim France, who is a professor in the Department of Psychology. Tim and I have been actually teaching together group dynamics, and we've also been doing writing and research on teams and team projects. And the material we're going to be discussing today is actually based on our recently released book, just a little Kindle book that's available on Amazon called Making Team Projects Work. And Tim's going to talk a little bit about our agenda for today.
This presentation has two parts. The professional development phase 1, which is today, is about foundational concepts in team projects. And then what really, given what's going on in our world today, the more important part is later, about 2.5 weeks later, and that's on virtual team projects. So today what we're going to do is we're going to kick off with a team exercise. Then we're going to talk about an overview of our perspective on team projects. We're then going to talk about 3 best practices. We're trying to keep it short today, but give you a little foundation, and then focus on the key takeaways. Then we'll talk about what's next and take questions. Lauren is going to start with our initial exercise.
So before you zoom out on this Zoom meeting, we thought we would give you something to think about. We know that one of the top skills that employers are looking for in their new hires in almost every profession is teamwork skills. And from some of the things that I've been able to read, I see that it's pretty important in pharmacy. And so whether you're in the classroom or practice site, we'd like to ask you to ponder these 2 questions. First of all, how do pharmacy students learn to appreciate the importance of teamwork to their success? And what have you done either in the classroom or at your practice site to foster that teamwork experience? So we're going to give you just a couple of minutes to think about it, jot down a few ideas, and then we'll go on to the second part of the exercise.
If you haven't finished up, go ahead and finish up. And now we're going to put you into some breakout rooms.
I got kicked out.
Yeah. We gave you all that great warning about getting kicked out, that it was coming. So
yeah.
We just never expected it to actually happen.
Wait a minute. College professors taking a long time and talking a lot? Shocking, I know.
You're not even in communications, Steve.
There are just lots of different scenarios to talk about, right? Classroom, peer to peer, interprofessional, just lots of different avenues. And so we went down all of those rabbit holes and really kind of got out nowhere.
So let's hear from each room. One person in each room hopefully was voluntold to speak for that room. So let's hear from each room very quickly.
Well, I was in, I think, room 3, if I read that correctly. Yeah. Yes. So I get to speak first and steal everybody else's ideas. But I think in terms of students appreciating the importance of teamwork to their professional success, the different interprofessional education activities that are scattered within our curriculum is, I think, the best example of showing students their importance of working on a team in their profession. We also brought up the idea of, we may do a lot of group work, but not a lot of teamwork in our classes. And there is a difference between being part of a group versus being part of a team. So I think maybe our students who are in different, for example, case study groups may learn to take up the slack of other group members who aren't doing their part, whereas in a team, everybody may have a exact role that they play. In terms of what has been done sort of at the practice sites, many of our practice sites have our students rounding with the clinical teams, which includes the providers, the patients themselves, as well as the nurses.
Good.
So I guess I'll go for our group.
It's group one, right, Chris?
I believe so.
Yes.
Yes.
So we kind of, I think a lot of, well, we kind of landed on the fact that to appreciate the importance, you have to do it. You have to actually be in a situation that requires you to function as a real team. And, yeah, all the practice stuff helps, and, doing team steps that we're all familiar with can help give a a baseline level of how to interact as a team. But until you really do it, you can't predict all the different things that come up. And I think one of the things that we talked about was like when we have students on site with us. And so we were all in our group, we were all from the practice faculty, so we all kind of headed in that direction. Like, they're not going to understand the importance until they do it, when they're on rounds, when they're on clinical rotations. And something that we also talked about was the importance of failure, and kind of like figuring out, like, at least for me, I only know how to do it when I figure out what I've done wrong a lot of the time. One thing that happened this week was that, a provider asks a question. And when someone asks a question, I don't just answer the question. I go pull up the patient profile, look at all the meds, look at all the disease states, and say, okay, they're asking this question for a reason, but is there something, further up in the chain of events that led to this question that we could address to, fix a bunch of different problems? And then in relaying that information to the rest of the team gets complicated, because then they're like, well, you didn't answer my question. That's not what I asked you. So it's kind of being able to, let the student understand that, and I think Anne mentioned the selective hearing, or how you interpret the team's question. Not necessarily selective, but hearing it and then thinking about the bigger picture. I don't know, what else did I miss, you guys?
Well, let's go on to group two, because we really wanted to keep this brief just to get everybody thinking about it. Who's speaking for room two?
I'll volunteer.
Thank you.
No, it's all right. No, I think pharmacy students, this is my own opinion, because we didn't discuss the first part. I think they all know already the importance of teamwork. It's just collectively, our experience is that it works better when they pick their own team. So they don't like to be assigned with other people they're not familiar with. And if we want to build a team, we need to invest time. So one member of our group mentioned the online pathway works better for these group-based exercises, because they seem to already have had an opportunity meet with each other, really get to or at least know each other better than our on-ground groups.
Mm-hmm.
So the students, so it's more productive.
Interesting. Good. All right.
But I think in terms of the composition of the team, it depends on the situation. If we want students to learn to work with team, like what happens for the interprofessional activities, you just pair up with people that you never met before, and you have common goal to work together towards. And I think that's how they learn the teamwork, right? Not based on the preferences, but abilities to adjust to the situation and also to other people in the team.
Okay. And every point that's been brought up, I think Tim and I could do an entire workshop on, especially group versus team. We have big debates about that one. So, all right. Thanks, everybody. Okay. So that gives us a good framework from which to talk about some of the things we want to discuss. Now, some of you have seen this model before. This is the IPO model that Tim and I actually have been using for years to teach group dynamics. And it also became the basis for our book, because it's got everything that we talk about in one visual. And so we've got, on one side, we have the inputs, which are obviously the people, what they know, the resources that they bring to the team. Then we have the task, which you as faculty members are going to be responsible for. So you're going to be developing the task that works based on the topics that you're going to be talking about. And then we have the context, which could be a physical context, like, are we meeting face-to-face? Are we meeting over Zoom? It could also be a cultural context, though. What are some of the situations that are going on right now? For example, I'm sure a lot of your students who are working in retail pharmacies now sense that, you know, there's a lot going on right now, and they may be giving other kinds of vaccines than the flu vaccine now. So there's a lot going on that input into that big circle in the middle. And these are the things that arise as the team is working together. So they are things like the norms that they use in roles, the leadership behaviors, the communication skills, how they solve problems or make decisions. And virtual groups is in here as well, which we're going to be talking about in a couple of weeks. So all of those process things come together and they lead to the outputs. And very often we focus primarily on the task outcomes because obviously the group has to get the task done. And so we want to know, did they do it well? Did they do it effectively? Did they make good decisions in their process? One that's often overlooked, though, are the person outcomes. What happens to people? What are they feeling, thinking as a result of having this group experience together? And we are going to be talking about that a little bit more when we talk about best practices. But in a lot of situations, there's no peer feedback or peer evaluation. And very often in our classes, we just give a group grade rather than looking at the contributions of the individual members. So this is our basic input-output model of groups. But what does a professor do with this? Tim is going to talk about a model that puts that into practice a little bit more.
So we took that input process output model, and in our book, we've rearranged it, which really is best practice number one, is an instructor flowchart for how you develop and run team projects. And what we want to start with, first of all, is team projects in classes do take more work. That is a premise. There's more things that you have to do. And this is something that people who don't run team projects need to get used to, because a lot of professors are used to taking an individual project and assigning it to a team. But team projects, first and foremost, need to be designed differently. An individual project has individual work to it, and individual work is certainly, as you saw with the IPO model, part of the group work, but a team project also needs to have some level of interdependency among the members, or create this sense of interdependency. So it's not one person doing all the work, or it's not something that the team can break up, separate, and bring back together at the end. After designing the project, the second phase is arranging the membership. Now, Lauren's going to talk about this in detail as best practice number two, so I'm not going to steal her thunder. You'll hear more about this. And then assign the project. And we do recommend that you take at least a little class time to assign the project and answer questions and go over the project in detail so they understand the team nature of the project. And then immediately following the assignment of the project, either the next class or even in the same class, it's letting the team to start to gel, develop them as a team, help them to set their norms, help them to set their roles, help them to build some cohesion. And there's some ideas in our book about how to do that we don't have the time to talk about today. Now, what's interesting is in the next little oval, it just says process and check-ins. So all that other stuff was a lot of stuff in the inputs. It is the design work. But interestingly, this is probably the biggest and most important phase of the IPO model, because this is what includes how to make better decisions, how to solve problems, how to resolve team conflict, how to communicate better, improve that communication in the team. And to help groups with this, it's important for the instructor to create multiple check-ins. And you'll hear more about this in the next two steps on the last best practice, where I'll talk again. Because after the group works together, they're going to deliver whatever this project is, whether it's a project paper, whether it is a paper or a presentation. We don't know. Everybody's projects are different. There's a delivery time and then an evaluation time for that project, which again, I will speak more about after Lauren speaks next about assigning people to your teams.
So it sounds like we could have a little bit of a conflict here or a little difference of opinion, but there's so many things we could talk about. So we picked out these best practices. But one of the questions is, should students pick their own groups? Because they say, well, I work better with people I know. This has definitely not been shown to be a best practice for a number of reasons, as was commented in Team 3 or Team 2. So the question is, if you get up there and say, okay, get yourself into groups, people will tend to gravitate toward people they know. In fact, my pharmacy students tell me that the people they sit with on the very first day of orientation and that table they picked out, they are at that table. And those are mostly people that they had classes with during undergrad. And so what happens to the people who, say, didn't go to Fisher? Or what about people who aren't part of the in-group or weren't on the baseball team with you? What happens to those people? And so actually, we like to take a page from team-based learning, and I know Kate and Ann have had experience because they were part of our teaching learning circle about how you actually put teams together. And what is the recommended practice is that you decide on certain parameters or characteristics, and you form the groups very intentionally based on those characteristics. And the process needs to be very transparent. So the students know exactly how and why they were put into those teams. And so it's very clear to everyone. It doesn't seem that you're picking on people or letting the students just decide. Now, Tim, for example, has used a questionnaire that he has students fill out in the beginning of the course. And he asks them to rate themselves on certain characteristics and then uses those to try to form teams so that they're cross-functional and they have skills in different areas. I've actually even tried letting the students decide on what the characteristics are. So once I tell them, picking your own groups, that's off the table. So now you tell me what you think will be good. And they've come up with some really interesting ones. So for example, I had a public speaking class where I had some students from management, I had some students from pre-pharmacy, and I had some students from communications. And they said, well, we have to make sure we have each of those groups represented. And one of the characteristics was they could never have worked together before in another class. So everyone went in with like a brand new team. And so part of the whole issue is that you get to avoid some of those pre-existing subgroups and people get that unique team experience that they're familiar with. So one of the questions we also get is, what if I have multiple group projects? Should I change teams or keep the same teams? One of the things I've noticed in some of the research that I've done, and I taught at the Simon School for a number of years, is that in many graduate programs, they put students into teams and they're with that team the whole semester, sometimes the whole year. I think I even came across a program that you were in the team for the whole 3 years of their 3-year program, which seems like a lot of the same team to me. But it's really up to you and what you're trying to do in the class, whether or not the second project built on the first project, and so you need to keep those teams together. We tend to mix them up a lot in group dynamics just because we want to get them experienced with meeting a lot of different people and trying to work through tasks with different kinds of people. And finally, there's a question of a team charter, and sometimes we hear people talking about that. A lot of team-based learning, they talk about a charter and having a group actually coming up with a hard copy agreement that everybody signs on to about how the group is going to operate. And this can work well. We've also just had the class generate what they would like to talk about in terms of the team norms and values, what kind of expectations they have for team behavior. And so we posted that on Blackboard. Then we go back to it if there are any issues in the class. In fact, the last time we taught the class together, there was one team that had like a really serious conflict, and we met individually with them, but reviewed those sorts of things. So those are some of the things that you can do. But another best practice that we wanted to talk about, as Tim mentioned, it's coming up, is how you do the evaluation process.
So we know that one of the biggest challenges that professors face is how to evaluate a team project. And we know we're going to have to grade that team project at the end, but just having a team grade at the end is not the only thing that we need to do to improve. We need to consider that evaluation system very carefully and decide on the weighting structure, incorporate ongoing feedback, and it's essential that we have peer review. And let me explain about all this. If we just are grading a team project, it's really easy, and I'm sure all of you have seen this, for individuals to free ride on other efforts. And if we just grade individual efforts, it breaks the team up and individuals work alone towards their own grade. So we need both individual and group or team grades. We usually can do the team grades using our rubrics that we use on those same kinds of projects, but we seldom know what happens in the team. So we have to incorporate that important peer review, that peer assessment, if we're going to evaluate a team project, because that's where we can find out what happens in the team. And so these team projects need more than just a summative final grade. Now, you have peer evaluations and you have instructor grade on the project. It's important ahead of time to decide on how much to weight those. As you all know, students will go towards, they're motivated to work towards their grade. And so weighting it ahead of time and sharing the weighting and the evaluation systems and the rubrics ahead of time will help your teams to be more successful on their projects. Now, there's two ways that Lauren and I have weighted the projects. Now, one way on little projects is we allow the teams themselves to decide on the weights. With some caveats, we use the 80-20 rule. When they're deciding on the rates or the weights, they have to decide within that 80%, 20%. So they can't give 0 to the individual or 0 to the group. It's got to be somewhere between 20 and 80. And it's, of course, got to add to 100. Now, when it's a big final project, Lauren and I decide on the weights ahead of time. So one thing that we've used, for example, is 35% towards the individual peer assessments and 65% towards our group grade at the end. And the reason we've come up with that one, and we're not saying this is the right one, what's best for your class depends on your goals for your class. But we decide on this because if somebody decides to completely blow off all of their individual work, that means that they lose 35 points and get a 65 if the team gets 100, which is not usually what happens, but that's the best they could get as a 65. Now, in addition to individual and team assessments, it's important to incorporate ongoing feedback. And you saw that in the instructor flowchart that we presented earlier. Multiple check-ins and allow the teams and the individuals time to incorporate that ongoing feedback. That way they can adapt and adjust to things that you've told them and things that their peers have told them. Now, you can use the feedback in formal ways. You can have walk around to meetings, you can give out notes and you can give critiques, or you can just check in with them informally. It doesn't matter, but time as an instructor to give them feedback. And then we also recommend that you give peer assessment feedback at least twice during a project. Now, if it's just a one-class project, this is irrelevant. But if it's a multi-class project, they should be able to get their peer assessment at least 2 times before it's used for their final grade. Again, so they can adjust and adapt to what they're hearing. So it's clearly these peer evaluations are essential. But when you get the peer evaluations, it's really important, one final thing, to check those peer evaluations to make sure you have consistency. Consistency in 3 ways. Consistency across times where you've done the peer evaluations, consistency across people, and consistency between the peer evaluations and the self-evaluation that they might do. Although self-evaluations are, of course, inflated often. But you're looking for that consistency. More often than not, if one student hasn't pulled their weight, they'll admit it. Now, their grade won't be as low as others, but it will be lower. Now, in the rare cases that they don't line up, where there's that inconsistency, we recommend to always have additional documentation such as agendas and meeting minutes, and you're following up and seeing what's going on. You're listening to students and what they've said. All that other information that you've gotten during the semester can help you untie those inconsistencies in the rare occasions when they occur. So best practice about evaluating team projects. So we are going to move to the final exercise now.
And we're going to ask you, we went through this material pretty quickly, but you talked to your colleagues, you heard from us. Can you think about 1 or 2 ideas that you could use immediately from today? So we're going to give you a minute to think about that yourself, and then we will put you back into breakout rooms, and we're going to ask you to come up with one that the group agrees on and share the ideas that you have. So we'll give you a couple minutes.
I have reopened all the rooms, and there's a couple. Mindy, what room were you in before?
I was in 2.
Okay. Let's hear again from each group. 1 person per group. What's one thing that you're going to take away from this?
I'll jump in for group 1. I think the one thing that we've tried to do, we come full circle, we do it, and then we don't do it, we do it, we don't do it. But I think peer evaluation truly has merit. I feel like we've never employed it very effectively, and I don't know how to do that well. So I would say that would be the one takeaway that we would like to do. I think we've tried to be strategic in, developing and assigning groups, be transparent. It's not just let them select their group. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. We're inconsistent in that, but we know how to do it. We know what the recommendations are. I think it's peer evaluation would be valuable for us.
Well, that peer evaluation form, just on an aside, that form, I meant to say this, that we had on the screen, it's actually on our website, which you'll see the URL. So we put it out there. That's the one we have used for formal check-ins. So it's available to you to modify. So
yeah, thank you.
Okay, next group.
I think I'll just go for group 3 to be more consistent in assigning teams rather than them self-selecting.
Good. And the students really like those self-selected groups. That it's exactly what that one group said. It's today. It's students really like it, but the evidence shows it really works better to do it as long as it's transparent. It's better elsewhere. So, and last group.
I think, yeah, we agree. It's important at the beginning, probably because we are very cohort driven. For each cohort to spend some quality time at the beginning when they're coming in P1 year, spend some time building that group initially before we dive into the coursework. So during the orientation week, we should probably make an extra effort trying to, help them develop the group working skills, and maybe take the opportunity to build the groups and then utilize the same group structure probably throughout the semester.
Yeah, good.
And then they'll know what to expect as well. So that is good.
Great.
Okay.
Now Lauren is going to talk about our final slide. Then we're going to take QA here.
So today we kind of tried to give you a really condensed version of the foundation of team projects. And in phase 2, we're going to be talking about improving team projects online. And I know a lot of people from pharmacy school asked us for our online chapter when we realized how much was going to be done remotely this semester. And it looks like going forward, we may be facing that as well. So we're going to be talking a little bit more about that and doing the projects online when we get together the next time.
Time for questions and answers. I know, Lisa, you had one. If you have any questions, by the way, that we can't answer today, this email goes to both of us. One of us will respond to it. And as I said earlier, this is our website, our URL for where you can find additional resources.